My name is Chris Thiede. I'm the managing editor of Comarch, and I'm joined here by Daniel Montroy and Steven Andersen of DeMarco Architecture. Am I saying all that right?
Montroy Andersen DeMarco is the form.
Montroy Andersen DeMarco.
Oh, Montroy. I'm sorry. Yeah, and I guess if each of you could give just a short introduction to yourselves as far as your positions and your areas of expertise and that kind of thing. We'll start with Steven.
Sure. I'm in the business almost 40 years. I went to school with Dan and Rich. We're college roommates. Started the firm 30 years ago as an interior design firm. And then when Richard DeMarco joined us, we also offer services for new buildings, building renovations. We work on restaurants, event spaces, apartments. So it's a very wide range of services. I come from a construction family. Used to work for a contractor, so I do all the budgets in the office, and I'm also the design director.
Excellent. And Daniel?
So as Steven said, we've been at commercial architecture for decades. We represent as many landlords as we do tenants, so we have a whole approach to commercial buildings. We deal with the infrastructure and the public spaces, as well as the tenant spaces. We're very service-oriented and entrepreneurial business. So we try to respond to the needs of our clients, tenants, and landlords.
Excellent. So as you and I, or as we're speaking here today, this is the middle of May in 2020. And we're still in many parts of the country, most parts of the country, in kind of the lockdown and what have you related to the COVID-19 virus, and a lot of businesses are having people work at home and that kind of thing, so their offices are vacant. Some places, some parts of the country, like where I am in North Carolina, things are starting to loosen up a little bit. But I guess just kind of set the stage here a little bit. What kind of immediate changes did this pandemic create in terms of how people work and how, the role of the physical office space?
So Dan, shall I take this one?
Yeah, Steven, go ahead. Get started.
Yeah. So when this pandemic really forced companies to close their offices, upgrade their technology, and allow employees to work remotely. Dan's going to go into more technology in detail, but this technology included hardware and software upgrades to allow people to communicate effectively, meet remotely via audio, video, conferencing, edit jointly in real time. We now have much more upgraded VPNs to eliminate lag and increase resolution. Task management apps allow teams to track and complete work as a group. I also want to introduce some health and wellness programs that we have joined and are becoming certified, which we think will be part of the short-term and long-term changes to offices. These programs include advanced air infiltration, indoor air quality sensors, sanitized cleaning technology and protocols, employee infection control strategies, active green walls we're going to see a lot of, ergonomic furniture, which is popular, but we think will become more popular with movement, standing desks, and acoustical environments, wellness areas, and healthy food offerings. So that's sort of where we think in general, things are going.
Okay, and Daniel, anything to add to that?
Well, I guess I would start by saying I hear people say a lot that they think we're going back. When can we go back? It's not so much that we're going back. We're going forward. This has been a revolution in a lot of ways. Outside the commercial office, we've all experienced at home, whether it's education or seeing your doctor on Zoom, or the way you interact with technology. The office environment is going to be no less shaped by this. And we have been advising our clients and trying to get ahead of this, to be responsive to it, And there are short and long-term changes and responses, and we're excited about the opportunities to do things differently and better and new.
So yeah, so let's talk about those short and long-term changes and the short and long-term needs that companies will have in terms of office space. I guess starting with the short term, and I like that idea of kind of not necessarily going back, but going forward. I mean, in the short term, what are the needs going to be like?
I think the first thing everybody wants to be responsive to is safety. People need to feel safe. They need to feel safe getting to work, whether that's in the subway and mass transit, whether it's in the lobby and the elevator, and then once they get to their office, they need to feel safe in their workspace, and they have to feel that they're respected, their health is respected, and they can be taken care of. So health, Stephen mentioned wellness. I think it carries over. When people have a greater concern for their safety, their health, and their wellness, it starts to change the way that we see the work environment. It also changes the reasons why we go to an office. We've proved quite successfully that you can work from home. You can do heads down desk work at home, provided you don't have interruptions from children and the other issues of working at home. So there has to be a reason why you go to the office. And we've been working on this for quite some time now. And it's an exciting new landscape.
Okay. So I guess, kind of thinking a little bit more now along the long terms, and you mentioned the idea of the reasons for going to the office perhaps changing. What might those reasons be, and then how is that going to affect affect the design and function, I guess, of the offices?
Well, I think there still is an appeal for office space. It allows for a little more collaboration, head down work, creative work, and production work as teams. We, as architects and designers, we come together all the time with design ideas that we all work together and come up with. Office space has got to support those creative spaces, and also neighborhoods. I think people still want to come to an office to socialize, whether in the office or out for lunch in a restaurant. I still think offices are going to be needed, maybe minimized. And then we have to follow all the guidelines, distancing and safety protocols, acoustical environments. All those things still have to be maintained, but I still see an appeal for an office.
Okay. So I guess, moving forward, in the coming 6 months, a year, or, and beyond, as architects kind of advise their clients in terms of, the designs of their workplaces and so forth. I mean, what's their role in all of this? What's the role of the architect and the designer, in this kind of new world that we're facing?
Well, we think of it as strategic thinking, to try to bring some thought leadership to our clients about the evolving workplace, how their companies can respond to and benefit from the changes they need to make, how the employees and the people who use the space can get more out of the space. We mentioned wellness, Steven mentioned collaboration, branding. There's a lot of reasons why a company would want to have an office space, and this is an opportunity to make it more responsive to the needs of the company and the individual, and to think holistically about those needs. The average hourly worker has a bigger stake here because health and wellness is on the line. Employees are going to respond to that, and I think it brings coordinated effort and response to the needs of the workplace.
Chris, I'm not sure if you want to talk about construction sites, which is part of our services. We maintain meetings and go to construction sites all the time. And as I've been talking to contractors, protocols in place are even stranger. They take everybody's temperature as soon as they walk in the door. They sanitize all these workplaces or construction sites every night. And there's all this social distancing. So there's going to be less subcontractors or workers in one place at a time. So construction will slow down. Schedules won't be met and costs will be higher. You're going to have post-COVID costs for all these maybe medical technicians on job sites. So besides the workplace design, how you implement that design in a new space is also going to change.
Okay. Yeah, and you one of the things that you mentioned earlier on was the idea of technology, and I think from some previous notes that I had, technology not only in terms of how companies operate, with their people, connections and so forth, but also the technology of actually doing the work that you do in terms of designing and building the spaces. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, some of the things that you're using to kind of manage jobs, things like video conferencing, virtual reality, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, we're doing a project in a brand new building at One Vanderbilt, New York City by Grand Central, and we're installing a restaurant in there, a very high-end restaurant. And the entire building was done in Revit, so it's all model, it's all made by models. Contractors are sophisticated enough where they're contributing to the Revit models on a weekly basis. So as a pipe is installed or a duct is installed or a wall is put up, that's all put into the Revit model, and they take photographs every week. So we've been having meetings outside the site, but really be there. We're really there. We're seeing the Revit models in 3D. We can help with coordination of all the trades because we have pictures in these Revit models. So I think you're going to see a lot of these subcontractors and general contractors also upgrading their technology and software to deal with it. I think Daniel mentioned too, we're doing animations of proposed design so tenants can see space without even going to see it. Dan, you want to elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, I do. I want to start by saying this pandemic has been a pause in normal business activities, and we've seen that as an opportunity to invest in ourselves. And we have spent money on technology. We've also given our people who might have some extra time or extra desire to fill some of their time the opportunity to develop our technological abilities on projects with our clients. And one of the needs that's come up is in commercial real estate, the need to show space. We've always done animations, renderings, and video walkthroughs. But I think this is going to reach a new level, at least in the short term, as people are reluctant to travel. If you need a space, you're not necessarily going to travel to see 10 of them, to shortlist it to 2 or 3, to negotiate on one. We have the technology, helping the technology to fill that need, and it's working really, really well. As Steven said, Revit has existed for a long time. Animations have existed for a long time. Using those technologies to enhance design and to bring it to people in a way that makes it useful for them to see spaces, to avoid transportation, and to make informed decisions. It's a new way of working.
Yeah, and it's really become upgraded where materials, light fixtures, workstations are almost real pictures. You can see this video and you feel like it's a fully designed space. And so there's no surprises to our tenants because when they actually put their foot in the door and go to work, they're going to see the same thing.
Okay.
And we're also doing it for the changes in the workplace. Most offices need to be responsive to changes for social distancing, for less density, fewer people, perhaps staggering their hours, staggering their population. And we can show them those changes in video walkthroughs and make those changes so that the workplace is new when they do open and go back. We've got a couple more weeks for that in New York, so we're busy with that work now. And that skill set and that way of thinking about space, the flexibility required to do it and to work in those kind of spaces may last a long time. That flexibility is a benefit to everyone in the workplace.
I also want to mention that we were forward thinking and thinking about flexible space even before this happened. We worked for the World Economic Forum and did their New York headquarters here, where I don't think they'll have any more, but they could have up to 150 people in one space, like they do in Davos. They have all these organizations and events that they could have it in a little smaller scale in New York, but we established spaces where conference rooms could be 2 people and could be 120 people, based on movable walls, based on acoustics, based on power requirements. And it was also a hoteling space where, depending on the group that was coming into work, if they wanted to work as a team, they could go to an assigned space that was ready for them. So I think that's going to continue, which we've been doing anyway.
Yeah. The idea of the pop-up office is something we're working with one client to try to do, to try to build offices, because people may come back and want to have some privacy, especially people who have the opportunity to control their workplace. They may want that personal space, they may want that office, but this could change a year from now. So one client is referring to them as pop-up offices. So can we do it in a way that's flexible, inexpensive, responsive to the building's infrastructure in terms of HVAC and sprinklers, reduce the density, and make the workplace flexible and responsive? Workplaces have been pretty static, and this opportunity to make it flexible is suiting the needs of the employer and the employee.
So talk a little bit about, there are some images that you sent to me of sort of the pre and post-COVID office space. I mean, talk about some of the key differences there in terms of, what they used to look like and, what they'll look like in the future.
Sure. So there's one I worked on in New Jersey. It's a triangular space. I think Peter admired that. I'll be on the first one. And it was a high density space. It was a lab for tea manufacturers. So there's 2 components here. There's HVAC changes, which have good supply and demand. And now we're converting those labs to more office space because they need to spread people out. They need to have the social distancing. And the air infiltration we put in was first class in the beginning, so now we're just continuing it. So we're adding some screens between workstations. We're making 6-seat conference rooms into 3-seat conference rooms. We have collaboration space now where there's social distancing. There's cleaning stations everywhere. It's really the guidelines that more of the health and wellness companies have used are going to be used more often. So essentially, we're spreading people out and still working together and staggering the office hours.
Okay. So I guess going back to the role of architects, I mean, when advising their clients, advising their clients about, their meeting their office needs, and what do they need to take into account? Do they need to have a mindset change, or do they need to think about other things? I know you mentioned earlier, the health and wellness side of things. I mean, what are some of those things that architects need to pay more attention now that they perhaps hadn't in the past?
I think it's going to be cultural changes. Cultural changes in a company where they communicate transparency and survey people regularly on their health and wellness is one.
Yeah, and we're also finding that there are generational differences. between the baby boomer and Gen Z. They approach the idea of going to an office, the very nature of what work is, and the responsibilities that the employer and the workplace have to them and for them very differently. We're trying to be responsive and trying to design spaces that are insightful and that meet the needs of organizations that are activity-based and responsive to those generational changes, and also the needs of the different people in the space. Doing heads-down work at your desk is very different than collaborative work in a studio or a conference room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think there'll be increased video conferencing, barriers between certain spaces that will have people be safely working there.
Okay. Will we see any kinds of new types of facilities or spaces start to emerge, in the kind of post-COVID world that, perhaps are just me speculating here, but workspaces that are closer to residential areas and not as concentrated in urban areas, that so for people who are working from home part-time but also going to the office part-time, it's a little bit easier, or anything. That's just an example. Will we see anything kind of new come out of this, do you think?
Well, Steven's got a specific example of an entrepreneurial response, and I think that offices need to be responsive to people coming and going from their office based on the activities. And we're trying to make spaces that are activity-based, not just occupancy-based. So you go there for purpose, and that the office is responsive to that need. You may not go every day, and offices may be more like hub and spokes, to answer your question. You may want to have a space that's closer to your home. Commuting for 3 hours a day to go to a conference room at the moment doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So there's other ways to do it, and the nature of food, of meetings, of lunches and dinners. And I think that's a segue for Steven to talk about a new entrepreneurial project that we're trying to respond to for a client.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, we've worked in a lot of restaurants, high-end restaurants, $20-30 million installations, down to 100,000. So there are all kinds of restaurants we've worked on, and we feel that business model is definitely going to change, because the whole social setting with distancing and with sanitation and with kitchen people working in a small area to prepare a kitchen is all going to change. So we are talking to these restaurant owners, and at the moment they're just going to be closed 3, 4, 5 months to see how this thing shakes out, because they can't run a business with less customers, and service will be different. So we've been hired recently by a national company to build. They buy buildings, Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, all over the New York area and all the United States, and they're installing 20 and 30 prep kitchens in these spaces, where the prep kitchens are almost like a WeWork for kitchens, and then they will lease them or use them themselves to prepare simpler, less expensive meals for delivery and curbside pickup. So that may be the new way people go out to get food, as opposed to going to restaurants. It's an unknown. We've talked to 3 or 4 chefs who have restaurants around the world, France, and England, and New York, and they don't know what's going to happen yet. They're stuck because they can't. They have a restaurant for 100 people and can only fit 40 or 30 in there, and so that whole revenue model has gone down the drain. So I think this new prep kitchen in a building may be a new norm.
Yeah, and I mentioned that because for a decade, perhaps, we've been densifying space and adding social amenities in the workplace to keep people there. Food was a big part of it. Social pantries was the term that was often used to explain these spaces, where you would have food, you would have meetings, you would have gatherings, and it would be part of the working experience. That may be much less attractive as we go back. Just getting food in and out of an office building is going to be a challenge for people, for both the operators of the building and for the tenants. Going out to get your food and coming back will be a challenge because elevator traffic may be limited or restricted. You may come and go from a building on a time ticket, both to come in the morning and go out in the afternoon to reduce rush hour traffic. The same thing might happen at lunchtime. So we're trying to figure out how the office can be responsive to people's needs for social interaction, for food, and how that ties into what happens in neighborhoods and the city as a whole.
So, I mean, you talked a bit about restaurants and the prep kitchens and so forth. That's interesting to me because, prior to the pandemic and so forth, things had been changing with the advent of more delivery services and more people were staying home, and you could get higher quality meals, through services like Grubhub and DoorDash and whatnot. So, do you see that continuing and perhaps being elevated in terms of these prep kitchens being able to offer higher quality, food quality and that kind of a thing?
Well, it does, but the challenge might be, at least in the short term, the challenge might be getting them in the building
Okay.
and having them come to your space. We're also responding to tenants who want to have a space other than their space where they interact with visitors and the public. We represent a public agency in New York City that, of course, meets with the public. They offer services to the public. Having people walk in off the street and come straight into their office and meet with them in their office or in a conference room, and that's their main business all day long, that's always how they've done it. They may not be able to do that any longer. And so how do you create a workplace that separates the public and the private, at least in the short term, is flexible and responsive and allows you to continue to provide your services?
Okay.
Well, I think it's what you're going to see. I think that's what you're going to see when we break down office space. We're going to have real public space and real private space, and control our clients and customers and employees on where they can go.
Yeah, the guy, the messenger guy who gets off the bike and comes up the elevator and delivers food to 30 or 100 people in a day, that's how it's been done. That will probably not happen anymore. The risk of having that many messengers delivering food in this environment is seen as a risk. So we don't yet know. It's an example of something we know it's going to change. We are not sure how it's going to change, but it does affect the workplace.
Okay. And so, I mean, that's kind of a nice transition into, and we've talked a lot about, office spaces and so forth, and a little bit about, restaurant and kind of the crossover between, food delivery to offices and residents and so forth. But what about other types of, I guess, commercial spaces like education or healthcare or even public places, museums and whatnot? Do we see any, or I'm sure there are, but what kinds of changes or what kinds of things do you see kind of happening in the future with those types of spaces?
We are not involved in a lot of those spaces. Our focus is commercial office buildings.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, we've seen instances where it's really reducing the population, the flow of people through the space. And when you project that across the number of spaces that you have in a city, it's a profound change.
Okay. All right. I guess any other kind of closing thoughts or things that we didn't talk about that you wanted to make sure to bring up?
No, the only thing we could talk about more, we didn't, is the generational uh, needs of the space and the difference between people who have control and hourly workers, and how spaces can be responsive to the needs of both. Uh,
Yeah, well,
that's
let's talk about that a little bit. Talk about those kind of generational differences and what that means to the office space and how architects need to respond.
I have talked to a lot of people in the 2 months we've been out, and noticed that people who have control over their schedules, people who are in control of the organization, if they're managers or leaders, they have an approach to space that's probably different than the employees they're trying to manage. Um, and how the workplace can respond to the needs of both. It was never of much concern before, but now the workplace needs to do that. And we also need to stagger the occupancy of spaces. Whether we'll do that by opposite days or whether we'll do that by different time periods in a day affects the workplace. And young people view it differently than people who are 60 years old. And how do we develop and design the right space for that?
And I would imagine certainly, where they're at in their lives in terms of, people who have children at home and people who don't, that obviously affects how effectively they can be working from home, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you have, I have very close friends who have a 5 and 7-year-old. They're both professionals. They commute in Manhattan. Neither of them has any plan to go back to work anytime soon. They might be off until this crisis passes, until there's a vaccine. They work for large companies. Those companies are responsive to those needs. They've basically given them a green light to stay home for a year if you have to. So that's one approach employers have. Other employers need their people in the office. The public service agency I was mentioning before, they have to figure out a way to meet with those people, especially if they serve the poor and disenfranchised members of our society. It's very hard to meet with someone about those concerns on a Zoom call. It's very hard to provide legal support to someone getting evicted on a Zoom call. So,
I'm sorry, then go.
no, so we're trying to figure out how workspaces can be responsive. And
Right,
we're going forward, not back to what we had.
We just started working for a company called Vibrant that supports mental health, and there's call centers for people who want to jump off a bridge or just mentally unstable. And we're just starting, but there's going to be completely different layouts and protection between people. Or, a lot of them will work from home and stagger the workforce. I think that's going to be the main short-term changes to office space, because the services are still needed for these people, especially the public services that are out there, not for profits. And so that's where we see some changes there too. People have to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also, I think this endemic has given us all a different perspective of life. We don't go to restaurants, we don't go to bars, and I think what you may see is a more holistic model in both office space and people's lifestyle, where health and activity and healthy food will all be put into the daily lives that we go to, whether we're working remotely, we're working in an office, we're taking a break in the afternoon, going for a run. I think all of those changes, where before we'd come in 8:30 to 5:30, put your head down and work. And I think people are going to change, and for the better, for simpler life, better habits. I have already.
Yeah, the work-life balance is much more important to people.
Yeah, go for a bike ride, walk by the ocean, cook a lot more. And I think that can happen in office space too.
Interesting. So yeah, I mean, there does seem to be, I've noticed that myself, sort of a, when I'm walking around my neighborhood or going for a run and so forth, I see a lot more people out than I ever have in the past. So perhaps, there is a little bit of a silver lining to all of this in terms of, the long-term, I guess, mental health and physical health that, and the way, lifestyle and the way people approach work and life balance and so forth.
Yeah, the optimistic approach is that we pull together, we get out of this, we develop new habits, and we have a forward-thinking culture.
Look how happy all these dogs are. You take a walk around my neighborhood, it's pretty open, but there's more joggers, bikers, dog walkers, happy people. I get a good morning or hello from everybody I see. So I feel a change to our lifestyle already, and it's just friendlier. It's less aggressive. I miss a bar. I miss a restaurant. I miss socializing, but somehow we got to work that out. We have distance cocktail parties in the backyard where chairs are separated, put some music on. So we're still doing it, but at a different pace, different style.
So overall, there's a sense of optimism. I mean, certainly things will change, but in 5 years from now, when we look back at all this, I guess what's your sense of how things will be?
5 years from now, we'll still be responding to it. And it could be a revolutionary change in our attitudes and our thoughts and the way that we work and what we value in our life for our time and our entertainment and our work.
All right. Well, thank you very much, both, for your time today.
Okay.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
Your opportunity.